Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Counterplay Plus Plus. This is our competitive problem-solving content on 6 Plus Plus YouTube. I am Tom, very lowest of men, and I'm back once again to solve a meta menace, a problem unit, a thorn in your side that you just can't get rid of that's been bugging you in recent times. One I get asked about a lot is Deathwing Knights. Now, Deathwing Knights probably not at the top of the game right now, but they're a really frustrating unit to play against. They're one that I know a lot of more casual players find incredibly obnoxious, and they're a really fun problem-solving exercise to look at because although powerful, they have very real limitations as well. So hopefully what we can do today is show off the problem-solving toolkit, get you thinking about dealing with these kinds of units creatively, and help you enjoy your games of Warhammer 40k that little bit more. Before we go any further, please do hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Let me know what you'd like to look at next. Are there any meta units you'd like me to unpack and solve? I'd be very happy to do my best and have a go for you. As ever, we massively appreciate your support. If you want to sign up and become a YouTube member, get access to even more of this wonderful content, help us make more, we would absolutely love you to bits for that as well. So thanks very much. Okay, let's get into Deathwing Knights then and looking at this issue. So first and foremost, what is the problem? Deathwing Knights are obviously the elite of the Dark Angels. They are super powerful, super effective warriors, and they come with a rule set to match. So here is the problem, guys. We are dealing with a unit that has a 2-up save, -1 damage, a 4-up invuln, and 4 wounds. That is incredibly chunky. There are certain kinds of profiles that simply bounce off this, particularly damage 2, but they also obviously absorb high-quality shots in a way other units don't. They are extremely killy in combat. They have a whole bunch of damage to attacks with access to anti-vehicle, anti-monster, so they'll slap through vehicles, tanks, slap through infantry as well. They can do some dev wounds, and they are typically playing at the moment in detachments that give them some kind of advance and charge as well, be that Storm Lance or Gladius. You see that a lot. So although slow, they can cover a deceptive amount of ground in a moment and suddenly appear in places and then be extremely obnoxious to remove. One fail-safe that Dark Angels have is access to the Watcher, which means on a turn you're trying to sprinkle this unit down with mortal wounds, they can pop up a 4-up Feel No Pain, which obviously makes them good at absorbing mortal wound damage and dev wounds once per game. So there is always a very real risk of not managing to do enough damage to Deathwing Knights before they do you a harm. So those are the profiles. That's the kind of start point. And if we're thinking about the problem, we're going to apply the toolkit I always encourage people to apply, right? So if we're going to solve a problem, we want to think about, well, what does my opponent want? Why is this unit here? Why are they taking it? What are they hoping to do? And then we can examine what the points of failure are. What are the issues with it? What kind of weaknesses does it have that we might be able to exploit? What are our ins for dealing with the problem and even getting around it if needs be? And remember, you do always have the hidden third option, which is cry about it and pray for nerfs. Not sure we're going to get those on Deathwing Knights anytime soon, guys. You might be crying for a while. So let's move to thinking about what the opponent wants. Ultimately, Deathwing Knights are, in the main, a counter-attacking unit, right? They're not that quick. What they will typically do is creep into position in terrain, then push out onto objectives, and a lot of the time Dark Angels have played this way across time, which is they want you to attack them, then they want what we'd call a bounce. They want you to go in, fail to do enough damage, be cleaned up in reply, and then they will spring a counter-attack. You'll see Deathwing used in this way all the time, pushed out, absorb the enemy attack, then roll through to win the game. They are an objective-dominating unit. Ultimately, Deathwing Knights are not quick. You will often see 2 units, and they'll be running at objectives, or there'll be 3, and they'll be running at objectives. So the game plan with these is quite telegraphed. You know where they're likely to be. They may work them in via rapid ingress sometimes, but a lot of the time you see them on the board. But again, the sort of objectives remain the same, which is they want to get to the middle, get to the objectives, claim them, kill anything there, and if possible, roll on to your deployment zone and your own home objective as well. So that's the game plan. So I think it's useful here to think then about what the points of failure are. So if we examine their points of failure, Deathwing Knights are not quick. Move 5. They have access to advance and charge in quite a few places, but even with that, their actual threat ranges are very mappable on the board. You can keep a very real track of where they're able to get to and where they're able to apply their damage. They themselves have low OC. There are ways to buff this up. You don't typically see it seen because Deathwing Knights are so expensive that it tends to be that a 5-man in and of itself is already as much investment as people are willing to make, which means they can be out OC'd on objectives quite easily. Their attacks are also damaged too, so whilst they have a lot of attacks and they are very killy, there are ways to frustrate this, not least other Deathwing Knights. I'm sure the mirror is absolutely miserable. And I think that is definitely this, as you see, this gives us a number of different ways into managing and dealing with the issue, right? So I think if we think about that, we'll move forwards and realize there's quite a lot of things you can actually do about Deathwing Knights. So in terms of solving the problem, I've moved with practical problem solving first because I'm aware, ignore modifiers is an option, guys. Anything with ignore modifiers as an aura or an army rule or unit rule, anything that you can pop to just ignore their -1 damage makes life a lot easier. But let's assume you don't have those things and you still need to solve this problem. So number one is move blocking and avoidance, right? If you can stop them getting to the points, putting things in their way, or once they're there, you can put cheap units in front of them that buy the rest of your units time to focus them down and deal with them, that's great. You also have the option of avoidance. You know where they'll be, and you know what their speed is. So you can simply not give them charges, because charges is probably the best way Deathwing Knights get around the board. If you are able to avoid giving them charges or put them on very long charges, so it's very unlikely they make them, by simply measuring out how far they can move and making sure none of your units fall within that, that helps a lot. Because Deathwing Knights are one of those units that once they get places, they're often there to stay for a little while. So the key is to try and avoid letting them get to those places in the first place. Once they make the objectives, there are a number of solutions. You can out-OC them. That involves throwing battle line or cheap OC high units onto points. That definitely means that as long as you can stop them scoring the primary, which is one of their main goals, that buys you time. You can tie them up, whether that's with hordes of Invun toting infantry, harlequins, or witches, or something to that effect with a 4-up Invun, or -1 damage is very effective on larger monsters and vehicles. Anything with a feel no pain or -1 damage can go in and tie them up as well. If you can get them to at least stop moving as quickly and be tied up on the points whilst also making sure you've got more OC on, then they're failing to achieve their primary goal, which is bossing the primary, right? So tying them up, out-OCing them, very effective solutions. Number 3, and this is a big one, is, we've talked about that bounce commitment, that bounce turn, this kind of running into the Dark Angels, losing and being rolled back. One way of avoiding this is to not pick a big fight across all the fronts. If you are charging into multiple Deathwing Knights at a time, you're increasing the risk of interrupt, you're increasing the risk of high casualties, and you're making it much more vulnerable, and your plan has a much more higher risk of collapse. So focusing and dealing with one brick of Deathwing Knights at a time, I think, is really good practice. Delete one, then delete the other. There'll often only be 2, but if there's a third, taking them out one at a time definitely helps. And that will mean that you're clearing chunks of the board rather than whittling away at all 3 and just getting in a protracted engagement, which tends to suit them just fine. They're very happy fighting for a long period of time across several fronts. I think those are the key things here. Obviously, having the ability to ignore modifiers like Armor of Contempt and damage reduction is huge if you have it. But if you don't, I think it's definitely useful to think about what your kind of optimal damage options are. And that's where there's a little bit of maths involved, thinking about, well, what are the actual practical implications of -1 damage? So a 2-up save with cover, with Armor of Contempt, and with -1 damage is one of the hardest profiles to damage in the game. To get around this, you want a number of different solutions. High AP 3 and upwards is ideal, because that's getting them into meaningful saves. And as far as the actual damage of your attacks goes, damage 1 or damage 3 both remain more or less as effective, because damage 1 doesn't get reduced. Damage 3 gets reduced to 2, but you were always going to need 2 damage 3 shots to kill a Deathwing Knight anyway. So those 2 work absolutely fine. Damage 2 is perhaps the worst. That's where the drop-off is most felt. And the other type of damage is D6 plus 2 or anything higher, really high damage shots. Obviously, they're not always optimal to be putting into Deathwing Knights, but at least with those kinds of damage, you are very likely to simply kill one on every failed save. Right? Dark Lances for Drukhari, a great example. They do actually go through Deathwing Knights very effectively if they fail some fours. I think the problem with the high quality shots is you don't have many. There's always the risk of them making their invuln. So some combination of all of this is ideal, right? Being able to sprinkle on an absolute ton of damage. This is always one of those units where you're going to need a lot more than you think you need. So lining up multiple activations to deal with them is key. All the more important now that Armor of Contempt only lasts for 1 activation. Obviously, ignore cover. Or anything that ignores battle stratagems via Battle Shock or Nemesis Claw, anything that can stop them using AOC, interrupting, any of those kinds of things is really, really helpful. And obviously AP3 with Ignore Cover now is effectively turning off Armor of Contempt anyway, so that's a very powerful tool to have in the locker for if they do spring Armor of Contempt. I'm thinking maybe Veterans of the Long War have a good strategy for this, something like a Vindicator, although D6 damage into Deathwing Knights is a real emotional roller coaster. So those are a lot of the tools that will help you push damage through. Mortal wounds are going to be effective over time, but not initially. So this is where the bounce phenomenon comes in, right? You'll get a player, they push out, they try and deal with the Deathwing Knights, they use whatever clever tricks they have to do dev wounds or mortal wounds. Then they pop the Watcher, they absorb you for that one crucial turn, and then they roll you. And so I think you always have to treat dealing with Deathwing Knights and other durable units as a long game, right? It's not going to immediately happen. You do not want to expose yourself and give them ins to hurt you in your first attempts to deal with them. You need to recognize this might take a couple of turns to actually do properly. And so you need to keep them tied up, blocked off, and keep your damage dealers safe. If you can do this, once they pop the Watcher, suddenly Dev Wounds and Mortal Wounds will work a treat, and you'll find it much more easy to hose down and deal with them as well. So I think those are my initial thoughts, guys. I'd be interested if you have other solutions for Deathwing Knights that I've not heard of. I think they are one of those sort of flat track bully units. They seem very scary. Once you start working out solutions and managing the threat in particular ways, that scariness really drops off, I think. And I guess that's what we're finding a lot with these Counterplay plus options. So hopefully that's something we can get you realizing in all of your games as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found this useful. Obviously, I'm very happy making Counterplay videos for any unit or combo you'd like to have dealt with. So if there's something out there bothering you that you'd like to see a video and a guide for dealing with, let me know. I'd be more than happy to make another video to deal with that unit for you. As ever, thank you for supporting us at 6++. We're aiming to have a big year this year, a lot of content. Please do hit like and subscribe. And obviously, if you'd be interested in signing up as a YouTube member to support us, we'd massively appreciate that as well. We've got over 60 members now. We're hoping to hit 100 this year. Really, really excited to see this channel grow. And if you would like mentoring or coaching with me or one of the other 6++ mages, then drop us a message and let us know. More than happy to work with you personally and help you achieve those competitive goals as well. Thanks for watching. Lowest of Men out. Bye-bye.